The British Prime Minister David Cameron's back calls for a public inquiry into phone hacking by tabloid newspaper News of the World.
Now, the News Corporation boss Rupert Murdoch has finally spoken openly about this. He's promised full cooperation with police investigations, and he issued a statement in the last few hours calling the allegations deplorable and unacceptable. But he stood by his head, the woman who's at the centre of this storm. For more, we're joined by Europe correspondent Philip Williams. Philip, there's so much to talk about with this story. I guess let's start with the latest, and that's the debate in Parliament on this issue.
Yes, the opposition had called for a full inquiry, an independent inquiry, judicial inquiry, to cover all aspects of this whole murky affair, and there was some question as to whether the government would support it. Well, they have come out and supported it, qualified support, because they said they want the police investigation to run its course first before there's this inquiry, but they have said there will be an inquiry. Here's what the Prime Minister, David Cameron, said about it.
An inquiry, possibly inquiries into what has happened. Let us be clear, we are no longer talking here about politicians and celebrities. We're talking about murder victims, potentially terrorist victims, having their phones hacked into. It is absolutely disgusting at what has taken place, and I think everyone in this House, and indeed this country, will be revolted by what they've heard and what they've seen on their television screens. Let me, if I may, Mr. Speaker, make a couple of points. First of all, there is, and people need to know this, a major police investigation underway. It is one of the biggest police investigations currently underway in our country. But I do think it's important that we have inquiries that are public, inquiries that are independent, and inquiries that have public confidence.
David Cameron speaking in the House of Commons just a short time ago. But the police themselves, according to some strong news reports that have come out, and indeed admissions from News Limited itself, some police members might be at the heart of this inquiry too.
Absolutely. In fact, calls for almost a separate inquiry because there are allegations that the police have systemically taken effectively bribes for information. We're talking about some police, not all police, yes, of course, from journalists from the News of the World, perhaps other publications as well, and that there was a cosy relationship that supported one another. And as evidence of that, there is the inquiry before this latest inquiry was announced by the police that wound up in 2009 that concluded there was no case to answer, that of all the 11,000 pages of information that they'd been supplied with, particularly from a private investigator used by the News of the World, that they'd nothing they gleaned from that warranted any further investigation. Now, when you look at some of the names on those lists, it clearly was wrong. The police were clearly wrong to shut it down at that point. And all of this other information has come out since. So there are very big questions now about some of the police involved in that. Now, one of the police leading that particular inquiry of last 2 years ago is now a columnist for News International. Now, these connections will be looked at much more closely now in the light of the information that's come out. Something I should add, just a few seconds ago, George Osborne, who is the Chancellor, effectively the Treasurer here, it's been revealed that his name was on this Mulcair's list also. So this has now brought it right into the heart of the government. We've had now, people, the celebrities, we've had the murder victims, we've had the terrorism victims, now right into the heart of the Parliament itself. So this is just spreading like topsy.
It certainly is, and the consequences surely have to be very, very significant for News of the World, News Limited, and of course Rupert Murdoch. I mentioned before that he has now made a public statement abhorring what's going on at the News of the World, but nonetheless he stood behind the editor at that time, the woman at the centre of all this, Rebekah Brooks.
Yes, Rebekah Brooks, who's head of News International, which is the parent company that runs the News of the World. Yes, and she was the editor of the News of the World in some of the years when some of this was allegedly going on. Well, it looks pretty certain it was going on now. And yet she's in charge of the investigation. now there's more than the one or two politicians have pointed out, well, this is ludicrous. We've got the police investigating the police and News of the World investigating their own people. How can you possibly come to a fair conclusion with those sorts of setups? So the independent investigation, of course, inquiry will be very, very welcome on all sides, perhaps except for the News of the World. But it won't start for some time. Now, this police investigation has been going on for 5 years now. Now, if it drags on for another few years, well, we won't get that inquiry because the government's saying until the police investigation is complete, they don't want to prejudice any legal action by having this parallel inquiry. Well, the Labor opposition has said, no, you can have a parallel operation, just being rather careful about what it investigates. You can get some information now. But look, we won't have to wait for that because the information's coming almost by the hour.
It is extraordinary and very quickly moving. Good to talk to you again, Philip. Thanks so much.